Can I please just begin with the statement of acknowledgement? We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we are meeting, and we pay our respects to their elders and to elders from other communities who may be here today. I'd like to officially welcome our new CEO to his first public council meeting. Welcome, Mark. Mark's had a couple of weeks already and is doing a fantastic job and has settled brilliantly into the organisation. Been down to Melbourne already, started to meet ministers and has certainly got out and about. So on behalf of all of the councillors, the official welcome, but welcome to your first council meeting. Councillors, I hope you have some fantastic questions for him. No, not really, mate. We'll go easy tonight. Okay, running down the agenda this evening, item 3 is apologies and requests for leave of absence. We have got one apology tonight, and that is Councillor Hall, who is away. Is there any other requests for leave of absence? No. Item 4 is declarations under acts, regulations, codes or local laws.
Thank you, and I'd just like to remind people that council's meetings procedures, local laws prohibit the use of audio, video or still image recording devices unless prior approval has been given by the chairperson or by council. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5 is declarations by councillors of any conflict of interest. I think we have a couple tonight. Councillor Mildren, did you want to start?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 8.8 and the item 16.2 in confidential.
Thank you, and you'll give me plenty of heads up on that. Thank you. Anybody else? No, I didn't think I remembered anyone from earlier. Thank you. Item 6 is confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. They're there on the bottom of page 3. Can I have someone move that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Second. Thank you, Councillor Watson. Did anybody need to speak against those? No, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Okay, item 7 is delegates report, of which there is none. Item 8.1 is council plan and budget items where councillors have a conflict of interest. Now, councillors, I don't believe anybody does, in which case this motion just lapses or the recommendation lapses. Nobody has any conflict? No? Fantastic. We will move straight to item 8.2, which is the council plan adjustment. There's a recommendation on page 16. Do I have someone either move that or put an alternate motion? I'm looking down the table. Thank you, Councillor Watson. Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Watson, any comments?
No, Madam Mayor, I think it's self-explanatory there, and as it is a draft budget, those things will come up.
Thank you. Councillor Lowe? No. Other councillors? No. Thank you to the work that's been done to adjust that plan. It is important that we keep reflecting any changes that occur over the time, given that it is a 4-year plan. So this just picks up and fine-tunes some of those things along the way. Councillor Watson, anything for close? No. Councillors, I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.3 is the draft 2019-2020 budget. There is a recommendation there on page 22. Can I have someone move that? Councillor Bennett, did you look like you had your head up? Sure. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Anybody else? Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Bennett, would you like to open?
I'll reserve mine for last.
Terrific. Thank you, Councillor Lowe. How am I going to remember to? Would anybody like to have a comment? Councillor Watson, go for it.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to firstly congratulate Officer Clean on a fantastic budget preparation with all her staff. Is that if over the period of time I've been on council, it's been a huge document and whittled down, but we're not losing any information out of it. It's just presented better and easier to read. So, and I'd just like to go to one part of the budget. Remember, this is very much a draft budget and it is going out to the people to have comment. And I really ask the community. It is an easy reading budget. Is if we went to Strategic 4, Objective 4, things that we'll be doing in our city with initiatives, and one of the strong things I see after being at Dinner Plain for Easter and seeing Bright and everywhere where they're bicycling is strengthen the visitor attraction experience by promoting Wodonga as a destination point for visitors. And we plan and upgrade tracks and trail networks, including the rail trail and linkages to neighbouring councils to enhance tourism opportunities and cycling tourism initiatives. So I think that's a really positive thing to keep our community healthy and safe, and all that. But also this budget is now ticking off and unfortunately it'll be probably the thing that the media pick up on, but it is closing off on all our issues with the waste management. But in this budget also is the fantastic thing we're doing to our library and art space, because all communities need somewhere for culture and for development. We build our sports fields and everything like that, but this budget will deliver on having, and announcements have been made anyway with the funding of it, but it is in this current budget coming up. But I think it's going to be a great thing for our city. I know when we built this building, it was a great thing for the city, and I can only see the Cube and the new art space library being a fantastic thing for the city. So, Madam Mayor, I just think, once again, thank you, Councillor Clean, Officer Clean, that it is a great budget to ease of reading, and congratulations to all who've been involved. And for the community out there, this starts back in November. It's not something that we just do over a month or two. It's a long process that all our areas of council, all the portfolio areas, all the service portfolios start putting everything in together. So congratulations to all. And now it's up to the community to test it and see if it's appealing to them. And we're within our rate rise as well. So we're doing everything by the book, I believe.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Other councillors? Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Mildred, comment? Yep.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's quite a few good things in the budget, as there normally is. A couple of the striking things that I find markedly improved is the fact that we've managed to deal with the waste management levy and remove the surplus amount of the levy, which results in a fairly substantial decrease in the levy. I think in the order of $112 per average ratepayer. And I note that's average. That doesn't mean everybody's going to get $112. That's the average amount. And I think that's a big move, and it's been done without the need to find that money from another source. The rate rise is the standard rate rise, which would have been applied irrespective of whether or not the waste management levy was in place. It applies in accordance with the rate cap that's in place from the state government. So there's they're very good things there that we're actually getting a reduction in the waste management levy, which I spoke about at length last year. There's a number of good initiatives that are in the budget that Councillor Watson's referred to. We have managed to maintain the renewal of assets generally in accordance with the schedules that apply or that have been developed. And I think broadly this budget is a reasonably good budget the way it's put together now, but I would invite the public and indeed request the public to go through this, identify what the initiatives are and the things are that are in the budget, and make comments positively or negatively, ask for other things in exchange for things that might be in there. Tell us if we've got our priorities wrong, and I'd urge the community to come back and give us that information. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Lowe.
I'll probably echo both my Councillor Mildred and Councillor Watson's words. I think it's a fiscally responsible budget. I think we've done what we said we're going to do, what we set out to do, and that was keep downward pressure on rates. We've achieved the Ombudsman, I think she gave us 3 years to reduce the impact of the waste levy, and we've now done that in 2, so we've done that with a year to spare. So we've not only done the Ombudsman's recommendation, we've kept downward pressure on rates, and that's very fiscally responsible. I note, and I have to thank Albury City Council, they had a motion in favour of a further continued support for our regional cricket hub as part of our 2 Cities, 1 Community partnership. What that has done is created a little bit of room in our budget, because we had budgeted for it with internally. So I'll probably seek the community's voice here and also fellow councillors. We have a mountain bike track on Klings Hill that is incomplete. It's been 80% complete. It's probably project earmarked back in 2008 and really took legs in 2016. And I just think for safety reasons, we hear a lot talked about safety for in this region and in that part of town. I think for safety reasons and also other, not only environmental reasons, but also tourism reasons, that we should complete this track. There's no point in having an 80% complete track sitting there. We can at least complete the ascent to the top of this, and that will further invite participation to ride up there. I did read an interesting report today that the top 5 sporting participations country ride is number 1 is walking, and 4 and 5 is running and cycling. And I think we've got a big advantage in our community, and it both fits in our health and wellbeing plans, especially with, you know, I was reading another report on obesity, and the heart rate level in Wodonga is number 1 in the state of Victoria. Yeah, and it's not a very good mantle to hold. So if we can do anything we can to increase recreation in our region, I think that's one thing we should do. But I think mainly just covering off on the safety importance of it. We don't need people riding up a downhill track. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Bennett.
If you haven't seen, there's a list of the capital works on page 19, which is really good to have a read through. One in particular are the Whytes Rd Murray Valley Highway intersection works. I've had a number of people over the past year talk to me who live in Riverside Estate out at Killara, and it's grown so much, but there still is only that one entranceway, so this could be fantastic for them out there. In terms of the community engagement, they're on all the list of the ways we're doing that is on page 20, and there's 2 that I just wanted to highlight. So there is a general public consultation session, and that will be held in conjunction with the Wodonga Ratepayers Association. Another one that we're going to trial for the first time is an online, kind of like a Facebook Live. So the councillors say next Wednesday night we'll be here from 6 till 7, and everyone can write in with their specific comments or questions or feedback, and we'll all be here being able to answer that immediately. So that's a new thing that we're going to trial with this budget consultation.
Thank you. Councillors, I think it is worthy of note to say a big congratulations to the team. It always takes a huge effort to put this together. Did so, we're a couple of people down at the helm. So, Narelle, congratulations to you and your team. I know that you work some exceptionally long hours. There's been a couple of highlights that have been raised, and I think they are worthy of note to, amplify. So, yes, we did follow the state recommendation of the 2.5% rise, but in actual fact, through the reduction of the waste management levy, rate rises, the average rate rise, and you're quite right, Councillor Mildren, the average is actually minus 2.58, almost unheard of in any council. So we've worked really hard to make sure that we did this, and we did it in line with the Ombudsman's requirements. You know what, we've been in a fantastic position because over many years we've had really good, strong, long-term financial planning, and you couldn't have done what we've done and achieved what we've achieved over the last 2 years without that. So there has been continued long-term debt reduction, very planned, which is actually the most responsible way to do it, planned in reducing rates where we had to have a few years of higher rates to be able to afford things like what you've seen occur in the CBD. We've ensured that borrowings have, in the last, I think it's 7 years, we haven't had any new borrowings. And that's been a really planned and very considered approach. That's what makes it financially responsible and fiscally responsible. The other really important component is some years back, it must be about 8 years ago, we actually took on new asset registers, so we could actually plan out better our asset maintenance and our renewal program. And for the last several years, we've actually met that renewal funding requirement. So this year it's $5.4 million and we're meeting that again. It's planned out in the forward look budgets where we will continue to meet that requirement. This means that if we do build new assets or we have roads, we're actually maintaining them. There's no point in building something that's new and then not looking after it. In addition to that, we do see investment right across all of our city. And I think that we can be really proud of that, councillors. We've done that for several budgets in a row. This means not just investing in the CBD, but all parts of our community. All parts of our community deserve and need some of that investment, whether it be in the local park, whether it be the footpath maintenance, etc. So right across the piece, we're seeing that investment. There is a couple of absolute key highlights. Councillor Watson, you're absolutely correct to see the delivery or the commencement of the gallery, library, arts and space. But you can see through the list there that we have in the report and everything else that's in this document, you continue to see the investment in our sporting fields, in our green spaces, in our roads, in our footpaths, in those community assets. So I think we should be very proud of this budget. And again, back to the team, thank you for all the work that you have done. Councillor Bennett, did you want anything to close? Councillors, I look forward to this going out. We look forward to having commentary and interaction with our community, particularly in the new ways. I think there's some really exciting ways we're going to hear from our community. So councillors, let's put this motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.4 is the meeting procedure local law. This went out last month for commentary. We had a couple of submissions. The recommendation that is there on page 27. Can I have someone either put that or put another motion? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Bennett.
So this recently went out for consultation, and it was really good that this came up to us because it hadn't actually been reviewed for the past 10 years. And in that time, things have dramatically changed. Even how people are communicating with us has dramatically changed. There were some things that I brought up around people's ages. And it's interesting, you know, I think maybe last week or the week before we had a teenager addressing the leaders of the UN. Times are changing, and so should our meeting procedure local laws. One of the things that I picked up was that our petitions, you had to be over 18 to sign the petition. So the Vic Parliament actually has it open to all ages, and I think no matter what, I actually think the age is irrelevant, whether you're 10, whether you're 60. You know, your voice equally matters. So we shouldn't be really even asking for people's ages because I don't think it's really that relevant. And that's certainly what's come through in the feedback.
Thank you. Other councillors? Councillor Watson?
Madam Mayor, it's one of the processes that we've got to now submit this to the Minister for Local Government if the motion gets up. But as with our new CEO, Mark Dixon, is that we've highlighted a few other things, but because of the time constraint, we need to put this up now if it gets passed. But I don't think, to let the community know, it won't be long before it comes back with a few more adjustments. And most of our documents and policies are working documents that aren't set in concrete. So I look forward to some of the feedback we will get with future amendments and changes to the local law.
Thank you. Other councillors? Councillor Mildred.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The vast majority of this local law reflects what's happened for a long, long time, I guess. But there are two fundamental changes in this local law that I think are just beyond the pale. Since the beginning of the Westminster system of government, the system of governance, the impartiality of the chair has been absolutely integral. This local law actually removes the impartiality of the chair. The chair is called upon to maintain order and impartial opportunity for all meeting participants, in this case all councillors, to have an equal opportunity to speak and to be heard. If the chair takes a partisan position, particularly publicly, and speaks accordingly, then those with an alternative or opposing view are inevitably disadvantaged. This is particularly so if the chair speaks last and has an opportunity to speak against the views of others and to introduce new material that can only then be referred to by the mover or the seconder of the motion. Convention and good meeting procedure says that the mover and the closing should only sum up the actual events. So in that context, the mover can't even come back and refute what the chair might be saying from the chair. Basically, what this provision in this local law does is it takes away the role of the impartiality, and it does not advance good governance or transparency or accountability in the process of how we run our meetings. This has been a convention for a very, very long time, and to change it in this forum, when every other forum, when you look at all boards, all meetings that are run with democratic process, has an impartial chair, and it's the impartiality of the chair is a fundamental component of good governance. And I think this is moving in the wrong direction. It doesn't cast any aspersions upon the individuals. It sets in train things that will change in the future as we have different people in different roles within the organisation and different chairs. This moves away from the impartiality of the chair, and I think that's a backward step. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Other councillors? Sorry, Councillor Lowe.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. We had this out as a draft and invited submissions in, and what after listening to Councillor Mildred and all he's said there about our meeting procedure law, there wasn't one submitter that wrote in about that. And I'll pick up on Councillor Bennett's point that the submissions that we had, and we had 4 of them, which were really great submissions, and a couple of those were young people wanting to have their voices heard. So maybe it's time the Westminster system changed as opposed to the young. So I just thought I'd make comment about that.
Thank you. Any other councillors? I am going to have a comment. I think there is, I'm with you, Councillor Watson, there is some more work to be done in that. I look forward to keep improving this document. I've already had conversations with the new CEO about improving. It's not that there's anything wrong with it, but actually improving the practices of this meeting procedure to allow some more fluidity, question time. Let's look at some of the best examples out there. So I reckon there is some really great work to be done. I'd like to make comment around Councillor Mildren's statement. I think it's great to quote that something's been done for forever, but it doesn't always mean that it's done right. And when we look at the parliamentary system, you actually have hundreds of people sitting in there with voices. We have 7 people that sit around this table. And what I'm hearing is that it means that, you know, not everybody's voice gets to be heard, and I don't think our public wants that. I think that everybody should have an opportunity to speak. Was an incredibly clunky way of moving position of chair, etc. But if we do that, then there is always one person who doesn't have their voice heard. And when we have a really hot issue, I think it's really appropriate. And in my 14 years sitting, whether it be as a councillor or whether it be in the chair position, I've yet to see it misused. And so, you know, to build something into place to cut out a voice that is, I think the community wants to hear on the basis of something that might happen, and when I haven't seen that occur in 14 years, for me, feels just counterintuitive. So I look forward to doing some more work around this, and I think that, you know, as always, you can always make things better. So I look forward to doing that, and look forward to, you know, continuing to have that debate. Councillor, excuse me, Councillor Bennett, to you for close.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to reiterate that point as well. So when you're in, you know, say state or federal parliament and there's literally hundreds of people, and when one of them is removed as chair, that's okay. When you're one voice in hundreds of voices, that's okay. But when you're one of 7, it's crucial. If I was a community member and I'd given the mayor, Anna Speedy, my first vote, then she got elected as mayor, and then had to step back from all the tough decisions. I'd be saying, that's a cop-out. Why aren't you making those tough decisions? That's why I elected you. So I certainly wouldn't want to see that, because I would see it as a cop-out, as you just being able to...
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
Sure. What's your point of order?
It's a point of order. it's factually incorrect to say that you don't participate, that the mayor or the chair does have a vote. So that's participating in the decision making.
Thank you. Noted.
Happy to reword
Oh,
that.
sorry, turn that on again. Yep.
Happy to reword that and say, when we talk about transparency, that is explaining the rationale as to why you have voted the way that you have. So you could just put your hand up and say nothing. Then the community is going to go, why did they vote like that? I don't understand. A key part, and especially like with live streaming, with this, all these things that we're doing to make sure we get all this rationale out, that would affect the mayor's ability to give all their rationale, which I think is so important in terms of transparency.
Thanks, Councillor Bennett. Councillors, the motion is there before us. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Okay, item 8.5, if I can just flick to that, it is the review of the instruments of delegation. There's a lengthy recommendation on page 67. Do I have someone move that or offer an alternative? Thanks, Councillor Watson. Thanks, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Watson.
Madam Mayor, once again, instrument delegations, we can review it from time to time, but I'm happy for this motion to go forward.
Councillor Lowe? No? Councillors? No other comment? No? So councillors, let me just give a brief summation in case there's any misunderstanding in the gallery or in the community. What we're seeing before us is actually about an update that we're required to do on the basis of legislation changes. So we see this occur sporadically throughout, it can be through the year, sometimes it's once, sometimes it's more, depending on those changes. We're required to pick those up so that we actually follow the acts that we need to, and that's what's actually being offered up before us today, including a couple of other changes that Councillor Mildred put forward in terms of some of the planning issues under the instruments of delegation. So, Councillor Watson, you have anything to close?
Oh, Madam Mayor, just a point that later on in the agenda we have just a single person appointed in the delegations award, so it's just one of those processes of council.
Thank you. Councillors, the motion is there before us, the lengthy one on page 67. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Thank you. Item 8.6 is the Waste Management Reserve Policy. There is a short recommendation there on page 70. Do I have someone move it? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Thank you, seconder. Councillor Lowe. Thank you, Councillor Bennett.
So this policy is above and beyond what we need to put in place, but for me, that extra level of transparency or clarity is what might be needed for our community right now. I'm all for eliminating any grey areas, and with everything that has happened with the waste management levy, I think this is a really good area to do this. To align with the Ombudsman's recommendations, when a ratepayer makes a contribution to a particular charge, there needs to be no grey areas about exactly where this money is being spent. And the waste scene is just so rapidly changing for local government. It's probably one of the biggest changes that all levels of government are dealing with. So in adopting this policy now, I think it would still be good for this to come up to us, maybe even in a year's time, for us to evaluate and still see if it's right. But I think at the moment for our community, it is right. And why this has come about is because we never know how much rubbish is going to end up in our 3 bins. We can look at the history, we can make forecasts, but we're not exactly sure. So even take me, for example. So this year I am very interested in waste, and I've been sorting my hard plastics from my soft plastics, and that's cut down on about 60% of the stuff going in my red bin. So if you were looking at my red bin last year thinking, well, this is how much you'll use this year, totally wrong. So that's why year by year it's really hard for us to forecast what's actually going to be in all of our bins. So this policy means that at budget time, like right now, if we had a surplus or a deficit with the waste management levy, like we do with the budget, we would go and have that specific conversation in line with this policy about what we'll be doing with that surplus, or, which is, just as likely as well, if we had a deficit.
Thank you. The councillors? Yep, Councillor Mildred.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I find this is interesting and generally reflect what Councillor Bennett said. The need for the policy is probably questionable, but what the policy is purporting to achieve is an admirable objective. There's some concerns, I guess, that can come out of this, that in trying to put in place a set of rules about something like this, you can't include everything in a manner concisely that makes sure you achieve the objective that you set out to achieve. And it would be conceivable in the way that this is put together that in some time in the future, a future council might read this policy in a different way to which we read it and understand it, and may say, well, this opens the door and allows us to set up a reserve fund or a reserve account where we could potentially deliberately put in place an accrual of funds from the waste management levy, for example, to accommodate a future infrastructure item related to waste. Now, that's not the intention of the policy, but to try and write a policy that covered all those things that might occur in the future would be rather difficult. So from that point of view, at this point in this time, I think this is a reasonable prospect to put in place. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mildred. Any other councillors? Councillor Mitchell, any comments? No? I think it's a great notion. I think you're right, Councillor Mildred, it is a bit above and beyond, but for me it actually helps provide that more clarity. And in essence, it highlights even further to the community what's sitting there. So the notion of a further council might decide to do this, when it's actually right there and it's so much at the forefront, I think that it actually helps remove any of that ambiguity. And so, let's put it in, let's try it, let's see what it does. This is a new era that we need to move into, and let's see how this behaves, and it will certainly bring it to the forefront, put it right up front for some discussion, and I don't think it could be clearer. So it'll be interesting to see how it turns out, and yep, in 12 months I reckon we have a really good look at it. Councillor Watson, did you have anything for close? No. Councillors, the motion is there before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 8.7 is Planning Scheme Amendment C129, introduction of the specific controls overlay to facilitate the development of the Baranduda Village Convenience Centre. Incredibly long report title. And there is a recommendation there on page 78. Do I have someone move that? Or, thank you, Councillor Bennett. Second, Councillor Watson. Thank you. Councillor Bennett, to you.
So I actually had a resident of Baranduda over the weekend get in contact with me who's lived out there for 16 years, and she said, finally, this is happening. This has been on the cards for so long. So this particular convenience centre is next to Baranduda Community Centre. Whenever I'm looking at how large a place is, I always sort of struggle looking at the numbers and I need something to compare it to. So if you happen to know the Aldi at Whytes Rd, it's about the same side, the same roof size as that place. And it has 72 car parks. In the business case, it did mention attracting people from outlying areas, maybe coming from Baranduda or Yakandanda, but predominantly it is designed to service that immediate area in Baranduda. This amendment seems to be the best way to manage this, and we have had lots of discussions back and forth about this. If the proposed development doesn't actually happen, the site zoning just reverts back to residential. So I think it's a really good safeguard in terms of protecting the original plan for that space.
Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. From the early days of the corporation that started Baranduda as a satellite centre, and in those days they struggled and they had a little store there. But this just now reflects with the populations, and I suppose it's the southern eastern end of Baranduda and Baranduda Boulevard. It will be servicing a larger population now that was there when it was first set up. And I think this would have been the dream of the corporation to now get what we would call a neighbourhood convenience centre. In the old days, that would have been a corner store, and we used to have corner stores in our suburbs, but now society has changed, demands have changed, needs and wants have changed. So we're tending to build in our communities, our suburbs, not corner stores anymore, but convenience centres. And I think this goes well with the whole hub there, with our community centre, with a school, with sports grounds quite close, and of course development, residential development. So I'm very pleased if this is successful tonight that Baranduda is coming of its own. And this will be a good thing because eventually there will be in the Leneva Valley, when that starts to populate, they have a town centre there as well. So this will be good, very good for the interim. And I think if it's successful, it will be a great thing for Baranduda and for our city.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Councillor Lowe, while I'm on this side, did you want to have any comment? No? Other councillors? Councillor Mitchell? No? Councillor Mildren?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been in the planning game for probably about 30 years. And every which way you look at this, it doesn't work. Any of the strategic planning objectives, any of the good community outcome aspects, it just doesn't fit any which way you look at it. If it's such a good idea, why are we not rezoning the land either to the same zone as the land next door, which is, or adjacent to it, which is for where the community development and little corner store is, or if that zone isn't appropriate, being a mixed use zone, why don't we zone it commercial to reflect the actual use that's going to happen? I hear people say, oh, but if it fails, then we can revert it back to residential. What a load of nonsense that is. That's a cop out, and it's not the way you should be doing proper strategic planning. The corporation did not envisage this level of development down into the residential areas. And if you go back through the strategic planning for the corporation, the whole township area of Baranduda was supposed to extend here and across further to the north rather than down out to the east. Be that as it may, things like that can change. But what has changed is we've put together a whole policy statement of urban hierarchy for residential hierarchy or retail hierarchy across the city. We've identified in our strategic planning that's been done for Baranduda Leneva area, we've identified, I'm told now, 2 other commercial precincts which will have supermarkets and everything else in it. Within approximately 1.5 or maybe 2 kilometres of this site, there's proposed to be 12,000 square metres of retail and commercial space. It makes no sense to intrude into the residential area and extend in and put a supermarket that, if you look at it in reasonable terms in the long term, this site would be made redundant. And what happens then to the building that's there? What do we do? Do we get a whole series of other uses that are in conflict with the residential area, and we have to approve those because of what the building that's existing, and because we don't have an ability to say we'll pull a building down? There's just so many things about this that fly in the face of good planning. It's actually using a backdoor method of the planning system to achieve an outcome that this system's not intended to address. It doesn't come out and do things in accordance with our strategic planning. We've spent a lot of money getting the retail hierarchy plan done, and it basically suggests that we shouldn't be doing this. This sort of thing's akin to putting a map up on the wall, firing a shotgun at the map from about 30 paces, and then building a shopping centre where every pallet falls. That's absolutely not the way you go about doing a good urban centre. This proposal is just the wrong answer for a residential area. It abuts a school. It's on relatively small, windy back streets. It doesn't have a thoroughfare. It's effectively into a dead-end precinct of Baranduda. To be something that's going to be economically sustainable, it has to have a bigger catchment than the area immediately adjacent to it. So I just find this, from every which way you look at it, it's ill-conceived, and for that reason, Madam Mayor, I won't be supporting this proposal.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor Mitchell, do you have any comment? Yep. Go, Councillor Lowe. Sorry, I'd forgotten you hadn't.
The reason why the officers have recommended this particular way of doing this is to help facilitate a speedier outcome, which would be better for Baranduda people as a whole. At very worst, I see this as a really good overflow for the school, because if you ever try dropping your kids off at that school, You talk about your traffic flow things. It'd be nice and handy to have a car park across the road where you can safely get your children to school as well. So unfortunately today, you talk about strategic planning, schools don't think about, they only think about where the school's going to go, not about car parking around it. And we've got some examples in town that are like that. As far as supermarkets being a bigger commercial retail centre down the road, a couple of kilometres down the road, you talked about a couple, you referenced Audi, and Audi's business plan is to be able to stand on one of their roofs and see another Audi store. Now, I'm not suggesting that should happen, but the supermarkets themselves won't be scared off about a small little supermarket being down the road. And those types of supermarkets are probably 20 years away being down there. So I think to service not only Baranduda, but some outer catchment areas, a supermarket of this size does fit. And worst case scenario, if it doesn't, no one takes up the option, it falls back to a residential zone. I think it's a win-win outcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lowe. Any other councillors for comment before I come back to you, Councillor Bennett? Some interesting comments. So, yeah, 12,000 square metres of space to be available just a couple of k's away. That's more than 20 years away. So I think it's a red herring. I also look at some of the commentary around less strategic thinking. Now, ever since I've sat at the council table, the notion of being able to support a small service centre for Baranduda has absolutely been at the forefront of discussion. So we're thinking about 2006-07, I remember doing a full review of the MSS. That was done again in 2013. And then just as recently in July 2018, we actually gazetted minor amendments and a refresh of the MSS, which is the Municipal Strategic Statement, which actually plans out our city. So I'm not quite sure I understand some of your commentary, Councillor Mildren. The other component is that our community out there, our community of Baranduda, deserves to be able to have access to a small service amenity like this that is being suggested. And despite all the free plugs for LD tonight, it's not actually LD. I just thought I'd put that out there because it'll be away, and it's not. It is actually a small service centre, and we shouldn't confuse that. I do just refer back to, and talking about MSS and strategic planning, you know, in accordance with our Wodonga growth strategy, which this council actually adopted, there's a clause that absolutely clearly, and previous, so it's been in MSSs, I've remembered this, where we talk about activity centres, Baranduda Village has actually always been listed. So, you know, this is about actually really good considered strategic planning where we provide services for a community out there that is growing rapidly. It's actually only out there on the weekend, and I think it's grown even more. We're nearly starting to abut Westmont there with the Glenwood development. And we're seeing that population growth out there without providing some of these required services. I think we would be remiss in our role. So for me, it seems a sensible way to deal with this because, as Councillor Lowe intimated, that if this particular facility that's being applied for doesn't come to fruition, it actually reverts back to residential. There's also another comment around putting a supermarket near a school. Well, we've actually got a fantastic example in this city where that occurs, and that's actually at White Box. And it works really well. You see the overflow of school car parking, but you also see that real amenity of the drop-off and then the convenience of. So, yeah, it's an interesting way, but I also note, as through our discussions and then into the report, that we actually went to the Department of Planning, so the overall planning authority, so bigger than us as the planning authority, and actually asked them for their best advice. And this was their best advice. So, you know, for me, I'm looking to the experts, and the experts are actually the state planning authority who actually gave us this advice of how to deal with this issue. So, for me, I will be supporting this tonight. Councillor Bennett, did you have any comments?
Just briefly also to counter some of Councillor Mildren's comments and to highlight what the Mayor said about White Box Rise. So that shopping centre abuts residential and abuts a school. And you know what happens when it's convenient? People walk. They don't get in the car because they live, 3 blocks away. They just actually walk. So like Councillor Lowe spoke about at the start, we want to really be encouraging people and building a community where people can walk and things are convenient. And that seems to work really well in White Box. And also in terms of that point of that those centres will be too close together. Well, Woolworths must have missed that memo because there's a Woolworths here and then 2.5 k's away in White Box, there's another Woolworths. So obviously they did the business case and worked out that if they build another Woolworths, 2.5 k's away, that's not going to affect their business here. So there is certainly enough to be going around.
It's not a Woolworths either.
It's not a Woolworths.
Just I put that out there. Councillors, the motion is there before us. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Yeah, of course. Councillors, the motion that's sitting on the table is that Council 1 authorises officers to seek authorisation from the Minister for Planning to prepare Amendment C129 to the Wodonga Planning Scheme. The amendment seeks to facilitate the development and use of a neighbourhood convenience centre at Baranduda. Item 2 authorises officers to undertake the preparation and exhibition of the planning scheme amendment in accordance with the requirements of Section 19 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 once authorisation has been received. Councillors, the motion is there on the table. All those in favour? Thank you. Councillor Lowe, Councillor Watson, Councillor Speedy, Councillor Bennett. Against? Councillor Mildren and Councillor Mitchell. I nearly forgot. Sorry, I called to wait to the end of that. Thank you very much. Councillors, thank you for the robust discussion. Item 8.8, that's you, Councillor Mildren, with a conflict? Correct. Would you just read that out to us, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My business undertook work in the past for the owner of the company who has made this application for permit.
Thank you. Item 8.8 is 193 2018 Whytes Rd, Baranduda, use and development of a contractor's depot and materials recycling facility. There is a recommendation which is incredibly lengthy. It goes from page 106 all the way through to page 111 because it's all the conditions of permit. Councillors, that is there. Unless you have other words, can I have someone move that recommendation? Do I have someone to move that? Thank you, Councillor Watson. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Watson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'd like to point out that this is in a industrial area, so we're not changing the land type usage. It's a permit to have this recycling centre in Whytes Rd. One thing we want to do in our community is that to recycle materials and instead of taking it to landfill and things like this. So I believe this, and that's why it's such a very long motion. It is trying to cover all the areas that may pop up, and that we will govern those areas if there's an issue. One part of it is CCTV cameras, which will be actually recording all movements in and out. So for once, we will have, the business will have physical reporting of things going in. I know there may be some concerns and different things, but if the business follows the permits, if it's successful tonight, we should be right to cover it. So thanks, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Bennett? No? Other councillors? No? Councillors, can I ask a couple of questions, please? It will probably be of Officer Schultz, who has no voice, so I apologise. I just want to make sure I've got absolute clarity. So If this site was to store at the maximum capacity, the 3,500 cubic metres, does this effectively change its, and it doesn't do the crushing or anything else, if that was just it stored there, because that's the maximum that can be stored on site, does that actually change its use or its impact in terms of the industrial zone?
Madam Mayor, I think it's fair to say crushed material is cash on hand, and it's quite clear that as material comes in, I think the business model would be for the property owner, business holder, to crush and recycle that material straight away. So while we limit the 3,500 cubic metres of material on site at any given time, I don't think it's going to be on site for very long.
Okay, thank you.
There also, Madam Mayor, also in one of the conditions, there is talk of amenity to the general area, which nothing that the property owner does must contravene the amenity of the area, and that will be policed through our enforcement staff.
Thank you for that clarity. And then I'm just again seeking some clarity in my own mind. Really, is in my mind we're putting it. This is being applied for in an industrial zone. It's an industrial use. To forecast that there might be a house that then is near it in the future of up to, I think it was 350 metres. I think where we've seen this occur in the past, and in more recent history, where you already have something located, at least if somebody's going to be buying a property, they're actually buying, buyers beware, because this thing would already be there. We've seen instances where Visi backs on to out in West. We've seen some other areas. So where you see a major road, for example, people buy knowing that those things are there. So I guess in some ways, for me, it provides a bit of surety for some of those future developments, but it clearly goes into an industrial area. I fail to see from a planning perspective how we couldn't accept this, and particularly with the conditions that have been absolutely spelt out in that, that's sitting as the motion. Including the further clarification that you provided to all councillors today in regards to the questions that had been asked around providing a landscape plan, etc., that was standard process. So do you want to add anything else around the landscape plan in addition to what you provided to councillors today?
Madam Mayor, no, not really. Suffice to say that a decision made by the councillors this evening may not necessarily be to issue the permit. It is a notice of decision. As per the officer's recommendation, it's a notice of decision to issue the permit. The actual permit will only be issued once the VCAT review periods have been exhausted.
Sure.
But no, nothing more to add, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And also in terms of the permit being issued, but things like the landscape plan must be in place prior to commencement of works on the site. So in terms of some surety and comfort for not only councillors but the community, those things are steps that must be in accordance. Thank you. Thank you for taking my questions. Councillors, to Councillor Watson for any close? No? Councillors, motion is there before us. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. If you could ask Councillor Milden to come back in, that would be great. Thank you. He just has a little further to walk than the council chambers. Thank you. Item 9.1 is the Audit Committee meeting. It's the minutes from April 4th, 2019. There is a recommendation there on page 141. Would our council or delegate like to move those, Councillor Mitchell? You will. Thank you. Would you like to second those, Councillor Bennett, since you looked at me? Thank you. Councillor Mitchell, would you like to have any comment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am the council's delegate on the audit committee, and our first meeting, this report is the result of our first meeting. And normally with a first meeting, there's a lot of cordial activity going on and establishment of various structures, that not a great deal of decision making. That will happen at the end of this month at our second meeting. I think you'll find that everything is laid out very well in the report, and I submit it for your perusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Bennett. Any other councillors? Can I just ask, Officer Klein, did you have anything you wanted to add since that you sit as part of this audit committee?
Nothing in particular. It's one of, we have a schedule for our internal audit review and also for our audit committees with a calendar of events that happen with meetings on a quarterly basis. So these are the minutes from our meeting that took place in the first quarter of this year. We'll have another meeting at the end of this month. We also meet to review the financial statements before they're adopted in September, and then again before Christmas. So we have a quarterly meeting where we review these items.
Fantastic, thank you. I think probably just worthy of note and really more about public information is that the audit committee is actually council law's vehicle for audit process, and council laws sign off the schedule of things that will be audited throughout the 12 months. And it's actually made up of independent people who have to apply to go on to here. And so it's just worthy of note because it is actually a really important vehicle for council laws to, you know, highlight any issues if they have any to come through an independent channel. So worthy of note. Councillor Mitchell, did you have anything to close? Thank you. Councillors, motion is before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Item 10.1 is the finance report for April 2019. It's for information only. Was there any questions that anybody had? Nope. Yes? Councillor Watson. Thank you, Councillor Watson. It is for information only. Item 10.2 is the planning report for April. Again, for information only. Was there any questions or any comments? No, you'll notice that we don't have a building report, but that is, we'll have two next month, councillors, just because you'll notice that it's not there. Item 10.3 is the competitive services report. Again, for information only. Does anybody have any comments? No. Worthy of note, we did hit 100% for contracts awarded to local suppliers. 10.4 Council Plan Progress Report. It is all the details are sitting in there. Again, for information only. Do councillors have any questions or comments? Yep, Councillor Bennett.
I just wanted to highlight to community. So there's 17 pages here of all the different comments, all the different projects and initiatives that council's been doing the last financial year, and it is well worth a read to see just how many different varying things that council does.
Absolutely, and worthy to note that this actually spans the 4 years to achieve the council plan. Go for it.
I'm just going to pick up and highlight a couple of those projects Councillor Bennett was talking about, and also this is one of the resources that we hand to our CEO as part of his KPIs. For him, those who are unaware, it's the council laws that hire the CEO, and then the CEO is in charge of delivering on our council plan and strategic resource plan. But we've got Red Carpet Youth Awards, and I wanted to highlight that because it's coming up very shortly. And if there's anyone that would like to hand out any nominations, they could quickly do that.
Nice ad, thank you, Councillor Lowe.
But also, I want to pick up one for you, CEO, and this is the progress for now, and it's over 4 years. It's on page 169, and it's to engage with the NDIS local coordination services on initiatives that increase the inclusion of people with disability in community life. And I'll note that it's only 30% complete there. it's not something that I'll hold you, but I'd like you to keep an eye on it. I'd probably also like to flag there seems to be a lot of people in town at the moment handing out lots of bunning. It'd be really nice if some of these people would hand out some money to the NDIS and their carers. It seems to be the carers at the moment that are missing out most on this poorly delivered program. So hopefully there's some inclusion there. That's all I'd like to note. So.
Thanks, Councillor Lowe. Anybody else wanted to note anything else? No? Good. Thank you. Item 10.5 is Assemblies of Councillors. They are listed there again for information only. 10.6 is Decisions Register for information only. Notices of motion, which there are none. Petitions, which there are none. And then we move to Council Seal items, which is 13.1, Appointment of Authorised Officer. There is a recommendation there on page 196. Can I have someone move that? Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Bennett. Councillor Watson.
As I mentioned earlier in the meeting, is that here is a delegation to one particular person, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Other councillors?
Should I correct? Madam Mayor, that I get a bit pedantic about some of these things, but this is not a delegation. This is an authorisation of an officer to act in statutory matters, and I think it's important that we get these things correct because it can have an impact on the officer involved if it's perceived, or if they don't get the accurate authorisation, then they can't carry out their function that they're employed to carry out. This is authorising an officer to take actions under the Planning and Environment Act, and it's a very, very responsible position.
Correct.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
That's exactly what the motion says. So thank you, Councillor Mildren. Councillor Bennett, you opened? Nothing. Great. Thank you. Councillor's motion is before us. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. So that leads us to there is no urgent business, and it leads us to question time. I believe we have one question. CEO, you actually get to say something in your first meeting.
Just very briefly. So, Madam Mayor, thank you. We have had one question submitted tonight from Bev Zuber. I'm meant to make sure that Bev is in the audience, but as I met her before the meeting commenced, I know that to be the case. So I'll read out the question, which goes like this. How much does the netball pay council for their area at Kelly Park? Who pays for the upkeep? If we, and when I say we, this is the Wodonga Croquet Club, if we take over the use of the bottom courts at the tennis centre complex, presumably how would they do that? And will these courts be updated and lasered for croquet use if we move down to that end? So thank you, Bev, for those questions. I will, if you allow me to take those questions on notice, because we can't give you those immediate answers tonight, but we'll take them on notice and we'll get back to you personally within, say, 5 to at most 7 business working days. So thank you, Bev.
No, Bev will come to you afterwards, I promise. We'll come to you afterwards. If you've got further questions, we'd be happy to hear them. Very happy to hear them. Thank you. Thank you for your questions. Good questions. Can we also make sure that, Bev, I just want to get the nod while you're in the room. If we provide those answers to you, are you happy if we make those answers public? Okay, very great. I just want to check. Yep, terrific. Item 16 is confidential business, of which I need to close the public meeting. Now, this is going to be awfully clunky, so councillors are going to remove themselves from the room. Normally what we would do in our council chamber is we would actually put you all out into the foyer and pull down the banners. We've got still got our YAS Awards, so we're coming back, I promise, but we have one item we need to deal with in confidential. But we're coming back to recognise our Youth Award. So if you can, please stay. We'd love to have a cup of tea with you afterwards, but most certainly we'd like to be able to celebrate our young people. But given that this is an unusual venue, please bear with us. Councillors are just going to exit into what's actually the green room at the back here to deal with the item of confidential business. So that leaves me to ask, I need to, under the Act, make sure that I have someone move that we close, I'm looking at Kevin, move that we close the meeting so we can move to a closed session. Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Does anybody need to talk against that? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Councillors, please take your paperwork with you so that we can exit to that exit, and we will be back. Return to open council. Can I have someone move it? Thank you, Councillor Mildren. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. No one's going to talk against that. All those in favour? Thank you. Motion is carried. Can I also have that the in-camera recommendations are adopted? Can I have someone move that? Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Anybody need to talk against that? Thank you. I put the motion. All those in favour? Motion is carried. So that leaves me to close tonight's meeting. and to now begin our YAS Awards. And Councillor Bennett was really keen to do the first one, and she's actually got all the notes for me because I've given them away.